So I've been living in the United States for my entire life. I've been through most states that exist, if not living there directly, then by um, just being at a bus station there. So I have experience in the country. I've been to a lot of places in the country, probably most notably New York City and Las Vegas, Nevada, both of which I thought were desolate and boring. I didn't really understand why people were so interested in them. I liked the amount of lights that Nevada had, but I felt like I could just see those lights somewhere else if I wanted to. And so I thought it was boring as fuck. I really hated both of those tourist attractions. And I've been through more rural areas. I've lived in Oklahoma. I've lived in Maine, of all places. I've lived in Virginia. I've been to most of the interesting places that Virginia has to offer. I've been all throughout Georgia, looked at everything they have there. I've been throughout Florida, seen all the tourist attractions they have there. When you stop at so many bus stations in Iowa, Ohio, these places, when you've lived for so long in Kentucky and Tennessee, you begin to realize that the majority of the United States kind of melds together. I remember when I was arriving in Illinois by bus and I was looking at how it seemed like every single company was trying to have a competition with one another on who could build the biggest skyscraper. And none of them felt particularly interesting. None of them felt like they were doing anything. They just felt like they were big. See, now, the trick is, if you want Illinois, but again, and with orange skies as a result of pollution, you just have to go to Missouri, the greatest fucking state in the universe. And I felt really put off by that. It doesn't feel like America has a distinct character. It just feels like it's taking little elements of every other country or every other culture that exists and then just trying to do those things but bigger and more expensive without really understanding the point. It spends so much time taking little elements of everything else belonging to everyone else and never really developing it to a level that it feels defined. Like when you look at a country like Japan, for instance, you know, you can look at specific architecture, you can look at specific cultural elements that define their cities and their society, and you can say that is Japanese, that is distinctly Japanese, and you can have strong feelings about that, whether it be disgust or, you know, joy. And like in the United States, the weird thing for me is that everything feels kind of gray. It doesn't feel like I have a particularly strong inclination to one feeling or the other. It just feels like I'm here. Like when I look at the images of, you know, China or France or Estonia or Russia, like I see the architecture, I see the cultural elements that define their culture, and it feels exciting. It feels exciting to see that. When I look at the mountains and the Buddhist temples in a place like Bhutan, it feels exciting. And when I try out all these different foods from these various cultures, not in the country directly, but through secondhand means, I get excited about that. It feels exciting, zesty, different, something that feels developed, like they have their own thing and then they stick to their own thing, defining it as much as they possibly can. I don't think we do that in the US. We focus so much on exorbitance and having a lot of little things in order to make up for the fact that we don't have a big thing. The closest to a big thing we have is big cities. And the big cities don't really have a lot of interesting things in them. You know, everyone says, New York pizza, you gotta eat New York pizza. Or, you know, you gotta go to Pennsylvania and see stuff there. You gotta go to New Jersey and have it just be like New York 2.0, but smaller. And I'm like, I go to these places and I don't understand them. I don't understand why they're important, why they're cool. That I go all through Times Square, you know, I go all through Manhattan, and it just feels like a place. It doesn't feel like a particularly good place. I can buy a lot of stuff there, but none of it feels particularly good. I can't walk around the street and feel like this street is distinctly defined by the culture of America. Or if I do, I feel like that culture is lacking in some way. I feel like it's not doing something big enough. It's hard for me to describe. And you know, I really feel jealous of the people who can enjoy stuff like that, because like when I look at it, it just feels average. It feels like everyone is in competition with one another to be the most average and milquetoast, or to just do that but bigger in size and shinier. And like the place that I liked the most was Las Vegas because it had lots of lights and stuff like that. But the act of actually being in the city is not fun, because you slowly realize that all of the casinos, all the various attractions just kind of meld into one another. They just feel kind of the same. And that was the place that I have enjoyed the most. I would give it like a solid like 7 out of 10, maybe an 8, a light 8. And so that's the highest ranking that I feel like the United States can go, because it does feel like it has something of its own. It doesn't feel like it's just copying a bunch of other things. The problem is that what it has of its own is just defined by gambling and exorbitance, and so it doesn't really do a lot for me. It's not really my aesthetic. But I would say, in from the standpoint of feeling individual, it is really good, and that's why I like that place. But everywhere else in the US that I've been just feels like the status quo. It feels like everyone is trying to maintain the status quo. It's not like they're trying to build new culture or have culture that's rigidly defined and different, succinctly different. It just feels the same. When you're talking about walking around and going to do things, another thing I'm going to end up inevitably hating about this country is the fact that our public transportation infrastructure is terrible. It just is terrible. See, I've been to Massachusetts, and I've been to New York, and I've seen all the taxis and shit. I had to do a ton of taxis when I was in Maine as well, and their taxi system is actually kind of okay because there's less people using them. This is Outlaw from the future. The camera just fell down. But essentially, the reason why it works in Maine was because there was less people using it, and so the necessity wasn't as big, and you could not have ginormous wait times for a taxi to get there, but still the wait times were pretty large. And in the case of being in Nevada, using Ubers, there were Ubers everywhere, but they never knew where you were, so you had to play a game of cat and mouse trying to describe where you were, and that was never fun because I fucking hate talking on the phone. And then, when I was in Massachusetts, all of the buses took fucking forever to get anywhere. The same thing was true with Maine. And by the time you get somewhere, you have to be late for what you're trying to do because none of the buses are on time. You have to wait fucking 30 minutes for a cab, and by the time the cab has gotten there, you're hungry and ready to just go get your food. If you have a car in one of these bigger cities, you have to deal with the fact that there's no place to park. So obviously we couldn't have a car when we were there, not that we could have afforded one anyway. But the opposite side of that is that when you live in a more rural area, one where you can actually afford to use a car, it's fucking expensive. And on top of that, you have to deal with the fact that you have to drive all over town just to get to certain things. Why can't I just go outside and have all of the things in walkable distance? Why can't I just go to a 7-Eleven and the 7-Eleven has everything? Why do I have to drive all the way across town to do so? Why is there not a train system in place? I should be able to just get on the train and go to a fucking 7-Eleven if I want to. I should not have to pay for mandatory driver's insurance. I should not have to get a fucking driver's license just so I can go to a 7-Eleven to get some shit. I don't want to have to pay for Ubers. I don't want to have to pay for taxis that take fucking forever to get here. And so, it's bad. It's a bad system. And every single state I've been in has had this problem. And it drives me up the wall. I look at a place like Taiwan or South Korea, and they have trains that run almost 24/7, not completely. You can just get on the train, and you can go somewhere else. In fairness, New York's trains were pretty good, but the police officers there were fucking assholes, and will just stop you for no reason, in my experience. And they tend to be overcrowded with a lot of dangerous individuals. That's another thing about the United States, is that there are crazy people everywhere. If I want to get on the train in New York to take the metro, I had my metro card around here somewhere, I don't know where it went. If I want to get on the metro, I have to be standing up right next to someone who very well might take out a knife and stab me. Now, the likelihood of that is pretty low, but trains crash. They crash. I may not be in one of them, but the possibility exists. Therefore, I should probably be a little bit worried when I'm getting on a train, right? The same is true with areas that have a lot of statistically high crime rates. New York is one of those places. Maybe if I go there just to have ease of access to a train, I also have to gamble with the fact that I might be one of these people getting stabbed. I don't want to have to get on a train thinking about the fact that a schizophrenic might be right next to me, and that schizophrenic is just having a few voices in their head that's telling them a few things today that they don't really like about me, that they don't like how I look, or maybe I sound like somebody who molested them, and so they have to get the jump on me. I don't like that. I don't like thinking about that when I go outside. And so, what do you do about it? In my case, I just chose not to go outside. But that's not a particularly practical solution. That's not how the world works. As much as some of us, including myself, might like that to be the case. So what do? You yeet out of the country that has the problems, and you go somewhere that doesn't have those problems. Now, people have always told me, if you hate America so much, why don't you just go somewhere else? Well, that seems to be exactly what it is that I want to do. By the time I turn 18 years old, I want to move to Vietnam, a place where I can easily just get a hold of someone with a motorbike. I can rent my own motorbike for $50 and then store it in a safe place without necessarily having the risk of someone stealing it. The crime rates are super low. Even at night, I can just go out and walk at nighttime with extremely minimal risk of being mugged or stabbed and so on. In Vietnam, there are trains that you have access to that you can use. You have, things like Grab and so on. You can get deliveries for even stuff like McDonald's or Jollibee. You can just get it delivered to your house. And the rent is extremely cheap in city centers, areas where I can easily just get an apartment and then go out and do things without having to deal with the fact that I have to pay $1,000 for rent just so I can walk to things that I want to go to. I don't have to deal with that. The rent is like $500, $600 at the most for a normal apartment. It's doable. It's possible. So when I'm in university, that's what I want to do. I want to be living the Vietnamese dream, going out, having access to things that I can go do and eat at, and, actually be able to transport myself places. Actually be able to be immersed in a culture that's consistent and interesting and has things about it that America doesn't have, and, please get me out of here in 1 year's time. This is a cat. We tend to feed him each day because he doesn't have a place to live. And you can see his tail. His tail got cut off somehow. We're not exactly sure how, but because his tail is messed up, he's very uncoordinated. So we tend to try and feed him to make sure that, he's eating. And he's kind of just stayed here. Like, he'll sleep in there, or he'll sleep in one of the chairs on the porch, but he just tends to stay around here nowadays. He's a very sweet cat. A very good boy.